all, I apologise to my viewers because that wasn't the greatest backslide or stationary moonwalk that I've ever done in my life, but the floor wasn't as slippery as I would have liked, so it was difficult to get the gliding motion going that one needs in order to create the illusion that is produced when one does the moonwalk. And Dospook, talking about illusions, you seem to be under one hell of an incredible illusion. You seem to think that it's impossible to harm somebody by bringing them into existence. Even when I'm looking into the camera and I'm telling you that I was harmed by coming into existence, you're saying that I'm being illogical. So I'm going to address this non-identity problem that you bring up in your videos, and I'm going to present 3 counter arguments. Hi everyone, DE. Okay, Dospook. I've watched your videos on antinatalism, and you disputed the asymmetry because you said you have issues with the non-identity problem. Now, for viewers who are not familiar with the non-identity problem in philosophy, I'm going to read out a common formulation of this non-identity problem that is given in David Benatar's Better Never to Have Been Harmed Coming into Existence. Please read it, everybody. Okay. 1. For something to harm somebody, it must make that person worse off. 2. The worse off relation is a relation between 2 states. 3. Thus, for somebody to be worse off in some state, such as existence, the alternative state with which it is compared must be one in which he is less badly or better off. 4. That non-existence is not a state in which anybody can be, and thus cannot be compared with existence. 5. Thus coming into existence cannot be worse than never coming into existence. 6. Therefore coming into existence cannot be a harm. Okay, now I'm going to read one of David Benatar's objections to this, and then I'll add my own input into it. One way of responding to this argument is to deny the first premise's claim that for something to harm somebody, it must, that is always, make that person worse off. For something to harm somebody, it might be sufficient that it be bad for that person on condition that the alternative would not have been bad. On this view of harm, coming into existence can be a harm if a life is bad for the person brought into existence, as it must be if the life is not worth living, then that person's coming into existence is a harm, given that the alternative would not have been bad. Okay, so let's imagine that I decide to get into a plane, fly to America, hunt you down like the devil's spawn that you are, and punch you in the face. Now, the reason that would be a bad for you is because the alternative condition, in which I stay in England and don't hunt you down like the devil's spawn that you are and punch you in the face, would not have been bad, you know. In this condition in which I stay here and don't punch you in the mush, that's a good, because the alternative of me coming to America and punching you in the mush is a bad. But when I do a good, i.e. I stay in England and don't hunt you down, I'm not actually influencing you, I'm not impinging on your life, I'm not affecting you, but I'm still conducting myself in such a way that I'm not increasing bad things that are happening in the world. So that's my first counter-argument to the non-identity problem, or Benatar's counter-argument, but me just elaborating on his argument. Okay, counter-argument 2 to the non-identity problem. Right, so I'm going to read again from David Benatar, and then again I'm going to give my own input into the argument. Joel Feinberg offers a different response to the argument that coming into existence can never be a harm. Instead of denying that to harm is to make somebody worse off, he disputes the assumption that to be worse off in a particular condition, it must be the case that one would have existed in the alternative condition with which it is compared. What we mean when we say that somebody would have been better off not having come into existence is that non-existence would have been preferable. Professor Feinberg offers the analogy of judgments about ceasing to exist. When a person claims that his life is so bad that he would be better off dead, he need not mean literally that were he to die he would exist in some better state. Instead, he may mean that he prefers not to be. Rather than to continue living in his condition, he has determined that his life is not worth living, that it is not worth continuing to be. Just as life can be so bad that ceasing to exist is preferable, so life can be so bad that never coming into existence is preferable. Comparing somebody's existence with his non-existence is not to compare two possible conditions of that person. So it's not comparing two possible conditions of that person. It's just an objective state of affairs in the universe. And your insistence on this non-identity problem is a result of your narcissistic, egotistical mind needing to imposing itself in a situation where you take your consciousness as an a priori truth, when the calculation is done in terms of using inductive logical reasoning and evaluating the amount of harm and suffering that is being experienced by a sentient being on the planet Earth. This does not require somebody like you evaluating two different conditions in which a person exists. Okay. Rather, it is to compare his existence with an alternative state of affairs in which he does not exist. And this is what a suicidal person does just before they commit suicide. So they're evaluating their current life, and they're seeing that they've been harmed by coming into existence, and that life is a harm, and all they want to do is end it. It's not important to them that after they die, they will be sentient, so that they can make a comparison between the condition of being alive and the condition of being dead. It's just the whole idea of being in a condition itself is, i.e. being conscious. That is the evil. It's like, okay, I'm feeling suicidal, okay, Dospook, please help me. In fact, I don't want your help. I want to kill myself. I want to end my consciousness. I want to end my sentience. I don't want to be aware of this pain and harm. It's not important to me that I won't be conscious and sentient after I slit my throat. All that matters to me is that this pain and suffering comes to an end. So what are you going to tell me? Are you going to make this logically incoherent non-identity problem? Are you going to phrase that to me? Is that going to stay my hand? All that's important to me is to end the pain and suffering that I experience. I don't care whether I don't want to be conscious and sentient to be able to make a comparison, because it's the actual condition of being sentient and being able to make this decision now, in the here and now, that is important to me. And all that's important to me is to end the pain and suffering. Are you going to console me? Are you going to console the suicidal person? No, I don't think you are. Okay, Dospook, and my third and final counter-argument to the non-identity problem will involve drawing a comparison between the Benatarian asymmetry and the implication that we can harm people by bringing them into existence, and the logical problem of evil that is that has been heavily used by philosophers of religion over many centuries. And yes, there's a comparison that can be made between these two arguments. They mutually support each other because they're both logically coherent. So let's look at one of the first formulations of the problem of evil, which is attributed to Epicurus, who was an ancient Greek philosopher. And he made the argument that can be schematized as follows. 1. If an all-powerful and perfectly good God exists, then evil does not. 2. There is evil in the world. 3. Therefore, an all-powerful and perfectly good God does not exist. Okay, and it's unclear precisely how the antecedent of the first premise, if an all-powerful and perfectly good God exists, then evil does not. This premise, it's not clear how the antecedent of that first premise entails a consequent. Latter philosophers have offered refinements such as 1. God exists. 2. God is omnipotent, omniscient and perfectly good. 3. A perfectly good being would want to prevent all evils. 4. An omniscient being knows every way in which evils can come into existence. 5. An omnipotent being who knows every way in which an evil can come into existence has the power to prevent that evil from coming into existence. 6. A being who knows every way in which an evil can come into existence, who is able to prevent that evil from coming into existence, and who wants to do so, would prevent the existence of that evil. 7. If there exists an omnipotent, omniscient and perfectly good being, then no evil exists. 8. Evil exists. Logical contradiction. Right, so let's go through these premises and relate them to the Benatarian asymmetry. Okay, so of course human beings are not omnipotent, omniscient and perfectly good, but many people like to regard themselves as reasonably capable of exerting influence on the world, and not ignorant and not horribly immoral beings. So 3. A perfectly good being would want to prevent all evils. Well, I don't think you have to be a perfectly good being to want to prevent all evils. I mean, I'm not a perfectly good being, but I would like to prevent as many evils as I can. An omniscient being knows every way in which evil can come into existence. Well, I'm not omniscient, but I know that all the evil that is experienced in the world is facilitated by the presence of sentient beings who can be exposed to pain and suffering. So I know the origin of where all pain and suffering comes from. You know, it comes from animals, including humans, reproducing and creating more sentient beings who will experience pain and suffering. An omnipotent being who knows every way in which an evil can come into existence has the power to prevent that evil from coming into existence. Well, I have the power to prevent evil from coming into existence because I have the power to make the decision that it's unethical to bring children into the world. It's unethical to impose existence on somebody by bringing them into existence. So if I make a decision not to have any children, then I am preventing that evil from coming into existence. I'm able to prevent that evil from coming into existence by not having any children and by not bringing them into existence. And I want to prevent the existence of evil, so I have a motivation because I'm compassionate and altruistic. So I'm willing to prevent evil from coming into existence by not having any children, and I want to prevent evil from coming into existence, so I am both capable and willing to not bring evil into existence. And that's why I don't want to have any children, and I don't intend to have any children, and that's why I'm telling people who are watching this video that you should not have children. And if nobody had any children, then evil would not exist.